Okay then, here we go. Workshop 1, setting up a machine. So what do we need to do in this workshop? What are we trying to learn? Well, we're going to learn about how we create a virtual machine and understand what it is. We're going to look at some network traffic just so we can see how the actual virtual machine links to the network, and we'll analyze the traffic by going into the packets and looking specifically at MAC addresses, because one of the things we're going to do at the end is change them. So what do we need to do? Well, first thing you need to do is make sure that your USB drives are NTFS formatted. I'm not going to do that because I'm just saving mine onto my already attached USB drive and I've already checked it. But you should check yours and also understand why you're using NTFS. Next thing I need to do is create a virtual machine, carry out a basic Ubuntu desktop install, and take the defaults as far as possible. We'll possibly pause a little bit to look at those defaults and how the hardware is set up, just to discuss a bit more about that. And then what we'll do is we'll set the network card up appropriately to bridged. And what we'll also do is when we've got it fully built and we've got the username set and the password, we will actually shut the machine down and have a look at how the network interface can be checked correctly through the virtual network manager. This is something you only need to do if you have a problem with the virtual networking. So let's do that first. Get the machine up and running in VMware. Okay then, to create a machine we open VMware Player. Hopefully when you open yours you'll find that there are no VMs. If there are VMs listed in here, you can remove them. However, never remove a one if it's called GNS3, because that is used in the networking modules, so please be aware of that. In our case, we're going to create a new VM, but we could open an existing one if it's actually on a drive, or download an appliance from the internet. We don't need any of those options. We're going to create a new virtual machine. The first thing that we'll do is it will come up and ask us where the installer is. What we need to do is browse and find it. Now, on the desktop on this machine, I've actually put a copy of Focal, which is the latest version. So I select that. The next thing I do is once it's got that, as I select next, and it asks me to put a full name. Now there's an oddity here, because some installations this will work, some don't, and it all depends on what work's been done with the installer by Canonical. So sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. Over time, hopefully it should stabilize. So we may need to put these details in again. So I'll put my details in now as I'm a student. This is what you should do as well. You're going to use the username student. And a password of Northumbria. Now the reason we use student Northumbria is, yes, it's very insecure, but it does make it easier for us to not forget usernames and passwords. And if we're in a laboratory environment, I can actually help more easily. Next thing we do is we now give the machine a name. Now this machine appears in the top banner when the machine is created. I'll show you that in a moment when we get going. What I need to do for now though is pick a folder as to where I'm going to save this virtual machine. In my case, I want to save this on the D drive of my machine. I'm going to save it in a folder called Virtual Machines. And I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call that folder Focal Desktop. I say OK, and it appears in here, D, Virtual Machines, Focal Desktop. I'm also going to give the machine a better name than it has there, and I'm going to call it Focal. So next thing I do is move forward. Now it's offering me immediately a 20 gig hard drive, but I do know I'm going to need a bit more, so I'm going to give this machine 60 gig. It won't use all of it, it's expandable, but I'll come on to that in a moment. The next thing we do is we pick how the drive is created. We can have it stored as a single file, or it can be split across multiple files, which tend to be 1 to 2 gigabytes in size. Now this is where the NTFS issue comes in. If you want to store this machine as a single file, you can't store 60 gig. So if you're using NTFS, we can use either. I prefer to split mine. So we'll go with a split. That will now give us a breakdown of the hardware setup. However, if you notice here, the network adapter and the memory are quite different to what I need. I've only got 2 gig of memory. This is a desktop, so I want to give it 4, and it's set to NAT. So what we're going to do is change that to bridged, so we customize the hardware. I go in quite simply and say I now want to take that from NAT to bridged. Bridged makes this machine appear on the network as a native machine. It's got 1 processor. That should be enough for what we're doing, but the memory does need to be about 4 gig. So we'll click on the 4 gig, automatically sets it to us, 4096, and we can accept that. We close, and if we go through this hardware now, we can see bridged, automatic. Now I know that will be a problem because it says automatic. We can sort that out with the virtual network editor in a moment. And then we've got 60 gig. We click finish, and what this will do now is it will actually start that machine and use that ISO file as the boot image. So as we can see now, the player's running, it's going through a normal boot screen. This is what would happen on a real piece of hardware. So if we bring that into the main screen, we can now see it checking disks and doing various tasks as it boots. All we have to do right now is just wait for it to come up and prompt us to put the rest of the details in that it requires. Not a lot to do at the moment, just got to sit back and wait. Okay, now once it's copied all the files, the machine will reboot. Okay, so the machine's reboot, and what we're prompted with now is the login screen. So let's have a look at some of the things we can do with VMware now. Okay, well, one of the nice things is we can do screen resizing, and we can log in, simply select the student account, put the password in, and there we are. We've now got our machine. Now we've got to complete the installation. So there's a few things we can do here. Well, it's a virtual machine. It might get destroyed. We never know. So don't want to put too much into it. It's just a tool for us. So we'll skip that. We don't need to set up live patch. And yeah, we can let Canonical have some information. We don't want location services running, and we're done. And now we have our desktop. Now, one of the things we noticed as part of the installation was the network card was set to automatic. Not really how we want it, because that means we can't be sure where we are actually connected to with our network card. So what we should do at this stage is actually have a look at how we can set up and control the virtual network cards. From here, it's a normal operating system. There's not a lot we can do. This is the difference between a virtual machine and a virtual environment. This is a virtual machine, and this network card is connected to the virtual environment. Now it all appears to work, but I just want to make sure that everything works correctly. Interestingly, just as I'm doing that, up it pops to say there are updates available. So what we'll do is we'll quickly do that, and then we'll have a look at the network card setup. If we want to have a look at the progress of the updates, if we open up, oh, we're all done. All updated. We still have our settings window open, so we'll close that down. Now what we'll do is we'll shut the virtual machine down. Now what we shouldn't be doing is using this mechanism for shutting down. That should be a last resort. What we should always do with an operating system in VMware is shut it down through the operating system. So if we go to here and we go not log out but power off. So we power off the VM, it will shut it all down and it's gone. Only when all of these machines are shut down can we actually start to play or manipulate the network settings in the virtual environment. Interestingly, one of the things I said about USB devices, if you notice here, it's found some USB devices. We don't want to remove or do anything with them. We just leave them by default. Okay, now we're back. The machine is created but shut down. If I open up VMware again, we should see it listed. And there it is. But what we're going to do is we're now going to have a look at how we can configure the network card to attach it to a physical device. To do that, what we have to do is run the virtual editor. So we go to here and there it is right at the top. For me it is anyway. for yourselves if you want to do virtual network editor, and you should find it like so. So there's the virtual network editor, and what we can see is it's set up a couple of networks for us already, a host only and a NAT. You need to be careful that these are not on the same subnet as your machine, otherwise you might have problems. Likewise, what we need to do here is change the settings. So if we go change settings, yes, what we should now get is the editor, and here it is, and we now have access to it. And this auto bridging is what we need to change, because what we want to do is when we bridge, we want to bridge to a physical network card. So if I look down the list, there's my physical network card, and that's what we should always do, map the bridging to the physical card. Host only, NAT, don't need to worry about those, we're all done. We can apply those, say OK, and that's our network settings finalized. So what we can do now is we can actually bring that machine back online. So if we open VMware, go back to Focal, run the Focal operating system, or the VM of the Focal operating system. And there's our machine back. So what we can do now is we can just expand that out a little. We'll come back to expanding the screen in a moment. Select student, put in the password, Northumbria. Okay, and there we are, back to our desktop. If I go to the network settings, I can go to the connected settings, wired settings, we should be okay, we should still be getting an address from the network, but I now know it's connected physically to the correct card. So, some other things we can do while we're here, if you remember, we gave it a name when we created it, and if you look at the top here, right in the top corner, if I expand this to full screen, we can see Focal. So this is my version of the operating system, but I still get my taskbar from my host operating system. If I actually want to go to entire full screen, I select that small option there, this little icon, goes full screen, and I've now got a full screen copy of the operating system running. I can then bring that back if I need to, just by simply re-windowing, and now I'm back to a scalable window. I can simply drag and drop and it's scalable again, or I can go back to full screen. Whichever way I need to use it, I can. Very, very useful. So, let's get this machine backed up. We've got everything working the way we want it. Let's bring it back down to a window. We'll shut the machine down and let's have a look at how we back it up. Okay, now that the machine is shut down, what we can do is we can look at backing it up. So if we go to the folder where we actually stored that image in the first place, which is here in D drive virtual machines Focal desktop, because it's fully shut down, all I need to do now is simply copy that folder. So if I copy that folder, copy paste, wait for it to copy, and then give the folder a sensible name. Okay, now that it's copied, I can simply rename the folder, give it a sensible name. We'll just call this one desktop 2. And now we can actually open it up. Now there's two ways we can open it. We can go back to opening it up by having our VMware player and simply going open the virtual machine and navigate to the folder. Or the other way we can do it is if we go in there, we can see that it's a full copy of the machine. Notice the multiple files, because that's how I said I wanted to create my hard drive. If I go to the VMX file, I can actually double click that file and it will open it up in VMware player. So we'll do it that way. Now what VMware does automatically is detect that that it's opening up another copy of a machine. And what we can do is we can say whether we moved it or whether we copied it. That's because it's detected the change in the directory. So we can say in this case, I copied it. And the reason for that is when we say we've copied it, it will automatically make a change to the MAC address for us. So this is in effect a new machine. Okay, the machine's now reboot. I can simply select the account, student, put in the password, Northumbria. And there we go, there's a machine reboot. And then I can take that up full screen should I wish to. So that's the machine backed up and renamed. I can bring it back down. And I'm ready to go. So we'll shut down that machine now. And let's move on in the workshop. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to start looking at changing some of the hardware settings to see how things work on the actual network. But before we do that, I just want to have a quick look at what we've got now inside VMware. We've now got two focal VMs. They're two completely separate machines, but which is which? Well, there's a strange little thing happens here. If we look at, I'm on focal desktop 2. If I click on focal at the top, you'll see that I get a lock file created. If I click the other, that lock file goes away. That's one way of being able to tell which is which. So this top one is the new one I just created as a copy. 2. However, the other way, if I select this and go edit machine settings, I can actually go to the hard drive and see that it says focal desktop 2. That might get a little bit confusing. What we can do is when we're in here, if we go edit machine settings, if we go to options, we can actually change the machine name itself. So we can change that to focal 2. I say OK, so I've got my focal and my focal 2. That is my backup of this. That said, what we now want to do is have a look what we can do in the workshop. So we'll get rid of this backup folder, take this out the way, and what we'll do is have a look and see what we've got to do next. Create it, do that. Bridge network card, we've done. User ID is done. Identify the IP address the client has been given from the DHCP server. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll do this on the original copy. So if we go to this and we'll play that virtual machine. Okay, the machine's now spun up, and what we need to do now is identify the IP address. If we select student, log in, Northumbria, and bring up the desktop. Okay, so there's our desktop. What we'll do is we'll do this all full screen, so we'll take this up to full screen and we'll work with it from there. If we go to the top menu bar, top right hand corner, we can actually go to settings or wired. If we go to settings, we can jump to network, but we'll do it straight from this one, wired settings. If we have a look, we can see we're connected to the network and we have a little cog symbol, which is the setup. If we go into here, the first thing we get are the details of the network. This machine's IP address is 10.168.100.148. Yours will probably be different on your network. If you're in the laboratory, you've got a free vend IP. What we also have down here is we have the default route, which is the gateway on this network. My network, it's 10.168.100.254. In the laboratory, it's 192.168.100.254. And the DNS settings I've got there, which again is my network, but depending on your network, you'll get a different address. So that's how we can identify the address. If we go to IPv4, we can actually see that this machine is set up to use auto DHCP, which is where those addresses came from. Just as an aside, before we move off here, notice where it says what the DNS settings are, they're set to automatic. That is why we were given that DNS, because it came from the DHCP server. What you will need to do for your setups when you start building your DNS architecture, you will need to go into the IP4 settings, switch off the automatic, and add in the IP address of your domain name servers. So if I was using, say, 10.168.100 and mine was running on, say, 66, and I had another one running on 10.168.100.67, that's how I would put my addresses in and override what the DHCP server has told me. So this is what you will need to do with your client machine when you're testing your network. or your infrastructure builds. So that said, I don't need those for now, so we'll delete that and we'll just cancel. So that's how we can get the IP address of the machine. But that's the physical aspect of the machine. And if you notice, if I go back into here, we actually have a hardware address and it ends E613. So if we go to the actual VM settings, and we can go to them at the top here, network adapter bridged. If I right click and go to settings, I can actually look in here. If I go to advanced, I can see the MAC address that was applied. And I can change that, but not while the machine is running. Notice there's a generate button here, but it's grayed out. That's how I change the MAC address for the machine. I simply select that and it will generate a random MAC address. Or you can clone a MAC address. We'll not go into the details of cloning MAC addresses, but it can be done. You can actually clone a MAC address in there, so this machine will appear as another machine from the network. But we just need to generate random ones. So what we'll do is we'll actually do that after we've run a little ping test to make sure that that is a real address on the network. So to do that, we will cancel this. We will bring this down to a window. We will open up a terminal, and to open up a terminal, we simply go Control-Alt-T. Oops. There we go. And we've now got our terminal. What we can do from here, we can now run a little ping test. So if we ping the Google servers on 8.8.8.8, we can see that the machine quite happily talks across the network. While that's running, what we can do is, to see it working, is if we bring up Wireshark, what we can do is we can actually do a capture. So we'll continue. And if we now run a capture, we can leave that running for a few seconds and then stop it. We can go into here and we can stop that running too, Control-C. We come back out to Wireshark. Let's filter the traffic for ICMP traffic. And we can see there's the machine pinging 888. And if we open up one of these packets, bring that in, and we start looking at it, we can look at the frame. And we're going to Ethernet 2. And lo and behold, source address E613. So this is generating traffic on the network as though it was physically connected to the network, and there is the MAC address that it's using. So the next thing we need to do, just to make sure this is really doing this, we'll change that MAC address on that machine. So we'll go to this machine, we'll shut it down and change it accordingly. So that's the machine shut down. So if we open up VMware now, we can actually go to that machine we were running, Focal, and we can edit the settings. We go to the bridge network card, advanced, and there's the E13. So let's generate a new MAC address. B698, this one's got on the end. So we say OK. OK to that. And let's open that machine now. Okay, that's the machine up and running. So if we now log in, now we're logged in, we can actually go along and we can have a look at our wired connection, look at the settings, and we see now B698. So we've changed the MAC address on the machine. What we can also do now as well, we can open up another terminal in here and we can do another ping test. Ping 8.8.8.8. So we run the ping test, we go back to Wireshark and we do a new capture. So there we've got some ICMP traffic. I didn't change the filter, so it's all I'm capturing. I can stop this, stop the ping, open up one of the packets, go down, and now we have B698. So the machine is now on the network with a new MAC address. So now all that's running. Let's have a look and see what we need to do next. And that's it. So that's the workshop complete. Thank you.